What is up, YouTube? This is your host, Ranee B, here to spill that homicidal tea. And in today's case, we're going to encounter some strange twists and turns that definitely lead us down a path that you don't expect. As always, please like and subscribe, and I'll try to keep this short and this little intro from going off into the ditch like I always do. And let's just get into it. The solved homicide case of Heather Nicole Maples. Though Heather Nicole Maples was originally from Texas, she relocated to Tennessee and made it her home as she prepared for college life. Immediately, she fit right in. And she made friends with the locals, had a great time just meeting new people while she attended Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Heather, she was a smart cookie. See, she was taking all of her undergraduate classes, but eventually planned to focus all of her scholarly pursuits in the field of psychology. She wanted to be a counselor or a social worker, not quite sure, but something along the lines where she could help people with her incredible natural gift of listening skills and the unique ability of getting people who may need just an extra boost mentally just to open up to her. I mean, this was her passion, and she dove in head first with all her might. And while she was in school, she needed to find a job. So luckily for her, the very condo complex she was living in was looking for a front desk associate. So with her personality and a natural knack for helping people, she was the perfect fit. On August 7th, 2015, Heather's front office coworkers noticed that she failed to arrive at work at the reception desk at her normal time. Since this was way out of the norm for her, her colleagues decided that they shouldn't wait much longer, and somewhere around 9:15 that morning, they called 911 because something was wrong. When police arrived on the scene, they made entry into her apartment, and any hopes of just finding that she'd overslept or wasn't feeling well were dashed. Heather was discovered and on her bed with obvious signs of head trauma. It was also clear that she had bravely attempted to fight off her attacker. One of her fists was frozen in time, tightly clenched, and many of her fingernails were broken on her other hand. Upon closer inspection, detectives also noted the telltale signs of strangulation. And whoever did this to her was not a victim of an accidental circumstance and definitely wasn't trying to defend themselves. Their intent was to kill this young woman. But what detectives could not help but notice was the obvious way that her body was placed. It was left in a position that left these seasoned detectives that encountered these scenes far too many times to recognize that she was most likely the victim of an indecent assault. Then something jarring caught an eagle-eyed detective's attention. It was a bloody fingerprint found on the bed frame by her shoulder. When the forensics team lifted the print, they were ecstatic because they held the tape up to the light to examine it, and they found that they could make out distinct ridge detail in the print. Since, the blood hadn't even dried all the way yet. While police were interviewing people on the scene, including her friends and neighbors, a young man approached them. And since there was a lot of he's and she's in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just give them generic names. They're not the names of the actual people. But just to make it easier, because if I keep saying he, even as I was writing this, I was getting confused. Actually, that's really the reason I changed the names. But the first male that came forward, let's call him John. He said that he was a friend of Heather's and that he was there that morning to return her house keys. Police learned that her door must have been unlocked all night before she got home with John, and that he stated that when he had ran into her sometime at midnight, she had been extremely intoxicated. He knew she needed help getting home, so he got her into his car and picked up something to eat for her and brought her back to her apartment. And actually, she was so inebriated that he had to help her get into bed. When she asked John about her keys before he left, neither of them knew where they were. So he said, hey, we'll look for them. We won't worry about them till, tomorrow morning, whatever. So that's why he was returning that morning, was with her keys, which I'm assuming they must have been left in his car, but that's my assumption. Anyway, that's why he was bringing them there to the apartment. Now, there are a lot of people, too many people, that don't lock their windows and doors, and they just aren't paranoid. Quick public service announcement, kids. Lock your windows, sliding doors, and entry doors. Even if you're just running out to your car or to the mailbox and back. I mean, it doesn't matter. Predators, they're everywhere and they are always watching. And the minute you think they're not, unfortunately, I don't want to cover your case. So please just lock your doors and your windows, please. All right, back to the story.
I could keep rambling forever.
Before everybody starts pointing fingers to this dude, John, like I did, I mean, I was like, hey, he did it. He was super willing to assist in any way. He gave a complete, detailed, and verified report of his whereabouts that morning and voluntarily gave his DNA to exclude him as a suspect. This guy had nothing to do with this. Detectives looked further at the text messages in Heather's phone. When they asked around about a particular guy, we'll call him Mark, Heather's friends and acquaintances said that the two basically hung out, made out, and bailed out. Whenever police interviewed Mark, he said that August 6th, the night before the murder, the next morning, they met up at a local bar. It was called Gentleman Jim's. But around midnight, they both went their separate ways. When asked about the text message that she had sent Mark that morning of her attack, he told detectives that he hadn't even seen the text message yet. That it was sent at about 2:23 a.m., so it totally went unnoticed for him. Detectives, they looked into his alibi on that early morning of her murder as well, and it checked out. He was no longer a person of interest either. Following up on leads, detectives searched for any police reports that may have had her name as either the perp or the victim. They came across a restraining order that Heather had filed against an abusive ex-boyfriend. Additionally, she also had a new boyfriend that was a known sexual predator in Knoxville. But he was over there, 3 hours away. And he was also on probation at the time. So both men, when they were looked into further, had valid alibis. They were both ruled out as suspects. In the meantime, the results of Heather's autopsy confirmed that detectives were correct in the strangulation theory. Her hyoid bone in her neck was broken. So that's a telltale sign. All of us true crimers know that bone for sure. Also, as detectives assumed, she was actually violated like they suspected. But they were able to get a really good sample of DNA. Now, that sample was processed and compared to all the males in this case. And along with their alibis, they're all ruled out, DNA-wise and alibi-wise. So they were all, once again, cleared, done, line them off. They deferred to the print evidence and uploaded it to APHIS. Boom, they had a match. The print belonged to Brandon Bowling, who was a 22-year-old MTSU student. He had given fingerprints before for a job application, which is common here in the States for if you're going to work in a bank or in securities or things like that. Brandon was originally from Memphis, and he had no record, but one little incident in 2012 of disorderly behavior and public intoxication, I mean, that was it. Nothing violent, no big deal. Just charges of basically bad judgment. Detectives looked at any connection that Brandon and Heather could have had, and they found that actually Brandon and Heather were Facebook friends, and they were spotted together at the same bar mentioned before that Heather had gone to with John, Gentleman Jim's. They brought Brandon in for questioning, and he told police about how he knew Heather and said that he and Heather had visited each other's apartments at different times, time to time, but it was nothing serious. So when police asked about the last time that he saw Heather, Brandon said it was about 6 weeks prior. Well, police knew that this wasn't true and confronted Brandon about his fingerprint being on her bed frame. He answered this by saying he'd been with a friend who we will call Ken on August 6th. They went to where they say the bar, Gentleman Jim's, until about 2:30 a.m. Brandon then said they closed the bar and went to a restaurant called Handlebars till about 5:30 a.m. Brandon said he dropped off Ken when he went home, then woke up for class the next morning. Detectives interviewed Ken and verified that most of it was true. Ken told police that they'd left Handlebars, not at 5:30, at around 3:45. Then they went to Kroger, a grocery store chain here in the U.S., to pick up some items at around 4 a.m. Then Ken started showing signs of emotional conflict, like getting really disturbed. And then whenever they asked him why he was so upset, he just said that he can't imagine that his friend Brandon could do such a thing. It wasn't that he didn't do such a thing. It was that he couldn't imagine he was capable of it. But how upset he was gave away the fact that he believed he actually could have done this. Well, this was, one of his really good friends. And knowing he was capable of such a horrific act, it stunned him and it frightened him. Ken agreed to donate his DNA, and he was immediately ruled out. But when Brandon's sample came back, perfect match. Brandon, and Brandon alone, was responsible for Heather's assault and death. What police surmise happened was that on August 6th, while out at Gentleman Jim's, Brandon and Heather saw each other, and it just ignited something ominous inside of Brandon. Then after John had dropped off Heather around 2:15, Heather sent one final message to Mark, and then most likely just passed out and went to sleep. Soon after is when detectives believed that Brandon opened Heather's unlocked door, what a predator, and took her life after having his way with her. Bombshell alert, police had enough evidence to get a warrant to search Brandon's phone, and they discovered a video on it that had been made in the final moments of Heather's life. Dude, why?
Some people are just terrible.
Wait, gross. Police brought Brandon in and arrested him for first-degree murder and aggravated sexual assault charges. Surprisingly, Brandon entered a guilty plea to the aggravated sexual assault charge, but he agreed to plead to second-degree murder, whatever. In February 2018, he was sentenced to a 40-year sentence for Heather's murder and a 15-year sentence for indecent assault. I mean, what a piece of filth. Police actually made it known that they believe that there's other victims out there. They routinely check CODIS for other hits on his DNA. Hopefully, if there are victims of his that were afraid to come forward at the time of their attack and eventually found the strength and the courage to make their case official, hopefully they can get justice now that Brandon's on their radar and in the system. I like to believe that there are not other victims, but we know as true crimers that that's not true, and that just sucks. So that is it for this case. This is another one I'd never heard of before seeing it on a show called A Time to Kill. I thought it would be a really good fit for this channel since I like to have a little purpose and meaning sometime behind the case, a cautionary tale, if you will, messages, things like that, because so many of these cases, unfortunately, just could have been avoided. And I mean, please, I am not and never will victim shame ever. No, nobody ever deserves this. I don't care what line of work you're in. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care if you're a thief. I don't care if you're a killer yourself. I don't care. Nobody deserves to have their life taken. No, never. However, it's just something that I wish that these victims would have known before their assailants took advantage of their trust and naivete. And I imagine that Heather Maples and like Shelby Barong Acco's energy like spin and dance with delight and joy whenever we talk about this, because that kind of makes their deaths not in vain, so long as we remember them and we take away lessons from their cases. I linked to Shelby's case that I covered before, but that's when I thought I could do makeup at the same time that I talked, and it was clearly not, no, my ADD ass, it can't do it. So if you do watch it, just remember that it was in the beginning, before I had a teleprompter, studio lights, and a real camera. But the story, nonetheless, is still a good one, so don't judge me. But back to my soapbox. Ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries, please lock your doors and windows at all times. You never know who is watching and waiting for the opportunity to snatch what's not theirs from you. I'm sorry, I sound like a mom. But be proactive in trying to keep these pieces of shit away from you guys. I mean, I really mean it when I say it. I adore you guys. And as much as we like to kid around being on here about being insane true crime weirdos obsessed with all these cases, all of you, each and every single one of you, are still important and deserve to live a life, an awesome life, free from violence. So the first step in that is being mindful of your own safety, not giving these fuckers any entrance to you or your family, especially your pets. And that goes for women, non-binaries, and men on this channel. I don't care. There's no sexual orientation or gender identity of these manipulating sexual predators. They go everywhere. They are everywhere. So go right now, please check your windows, check your doors, make sure you're locked. A lot of times when it's nice out, we'll just open a window, and then, when we shut it, we're just like, boom. So check them. I mean, it could save your life. So now that we've had that uplifting outro, we'll see you in the next video.